Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of the Medical Device Success Podcast. And this happens to be a video cast too. So, the question: how do life science companies go forward and succeed in a world of virtual congresses and trade shows? Well, that's the subject matter of a three-part series that we've put together on virtual trade shows and alternatives. And I'm really pleased to be teamed up with Lisa Bichsel and the Bichsel Medical Marketing Group for this effort. It's a lot of work, and I think we have some valuable information to share. Medical associations and medical device companies, life science companies, are working in a very challenging environment, as most of the congresses and trade shows have been canceled through the end of this year and perhaps into early next year. So how do we go forward? Well, in this three-part series, this first part is a medical guide for medical marketers. The second part of the series is where we talk to leaders of the healthcare exhibiting and events ecosystem to get their perspective on what is going on and their advice as to what we should look for going forward into the future. And in the third episode of the series, we talk to doctors to find out where they stand and what this means to them and how they intend on participating. This is going to be valuable information, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Let me be clear. This first episode is long, and you may want to break it up into 20-minute segments or 30-minute segments as you listen to it and if you view it. But it's full of very important information. So let's get started. And welcome everybody to this first of its kind from me, which is a podcast and a video cast. So it'll be split into a podcast. Hopefully people will be able to understand most of what we're talking about by listening, but the video cast is going to have some slides which provide some really important context and detail, and highly recommend that you go to that. And so today's Videocast podcast is done in conjunction with the Bichsel Medical Marketing Group, a terrific crew of people out in the Colorado area that serve med tech companies, life science companies, and it's called Virtual Trade Shows and Alternatives, a Guide for Medical Marketers. And so this is important whether you're a marketing person or a salesperson. You really need to understand how virtual trade shows work, our first experiences with them, and so on. And so today, in addition to myself, the host, Ted Newell, we've got Lisa Bichsel, who's the CEO of Bichsel Medical Marketing Group, and we have Lauren Dussman, who's the events leader at Bichsel Medical Marketing Group. So we've got two very experienced people helping, and they've really helped put together a terrific program for us to share today. Lisa, Lauren, welcome.
Thanks for inviting us. It's nice to be back, because I know earlier in the spring we had discussions about, thinking ahead, what would be the future, what might the year play out to be, and now we're seeing some of it in our rearview mirror, and it's interesting, some of the evolution. So it'd be nice to share that today.
You're very nice. It's interesting and disturbing.
Oh yeah. All right, there you go.
Yeah, the evolution, just because when you and I talked, and let's move sort of to the objectives. When you and I talked back then, we were talking about looking at the virus as a short-term event. That's something that might affect us for 2 or 3 months, and that we probably had the back half of the year where we could still participate in trade shows. And we know how important they are from the standpoint of getting actionable leads and actual sales on the trade show floor. And then a couple more months goes by, and the advice we gave is no longer applicable. So we're here to give new advice, right?
Well, that's exactly right. It feels like it is and will be continuing to be a rolling horizon where, you can only be as accurate as maybe 60 days, 90 days out, because things are going to be so radically different perhaps, or, what you think might be reverting back to normal, might not play out exactly as you forecasted. So yeah, I'm questioning whether or not we get too far out in our predictions because it gets really fuzzy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I know some meetings have tried to indicate that they would be in person in the late winter and or spring, but as COVID-19 continues to roil around in this country, who knows? But right now, the situation is that everybody has pretty much gone virtual. There's no in-person meetings, at least the United States, Europe, uh, Pacific Rim, no in-person meetings through the end of the year.
For some of our clients, that's not necessarily the case. Lauren, you want to talk about that?
Right. I actually confirmed for an association in Florida that this last week I confirmed with them, they do in fact intend to have a live meeting. They are moving forward. They are dedicated to this, and they are just taking precautions with PPE and social distancing, but they fully intend to have a live meeting in December, and they're already locking in on hotel and venue space as well.
Wow.
That to me probably isn't so surprising, providing that most everybody drives, right? You're not really getting on a plane, especially if it's a regional program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that being probably the future of medical events. But that probably isn't so odd. And another one that we know that's going to happen in December as well in New York City, always happens faithfully in just right in Times Square right before Christmas. They're saying too that they're going to be in person, but likewise, I feel as if the faculty, as long as it's a local draw and everybody's driving in from, the Northeast, which is pretty convenient, that probably will go off without any challenges with social distancing and masks and everything. So,
and both of these examples that you're giving are geographically specific meetings?
Yeah. New York State this, Florida State that. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting to know when you're thinking strategically, looking out in the future. Okay, so maybe we can circle back to that more as we're getting into what the strategies and tactics should be.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go on. And so that's the situation right now. And let's go on and talk about what a virtual trade show looks like. Because we've got this big question as these virtual trade shows come up. How well are they implemented or executed? Can you get attention and so on? So the big question here is to exhibit or not to exhibit. And eventually, what are some alternatives? So what does a virtual trade show look like these days? And you guys had some experience with a big meeting in Europe, but then let's talk through what we see on this particular slide.
Absolutely. So, and I'm happy to provide some more insight as to what a virtual trade show looks like today. More and more of us are getting exposure to virtual trade shows, and I recommend any sales and marketing professional look outside of your trade show calendar and see what other virtual trade shows you can attend, just to experience what they look like and understand what that feels like, so that when it comes to a show where you might be exhibiting in the future, you know what to expect. Nowadays, when we look at virtual trade shows, how they work, there are really 4 key elements, and a virtual trade show from an exhibit perspective will include at least one of these 4 elements. The first one is advertising opportunities. You can kind of see that down here in the lower left picture, but that includes e-blasts, mailings, website banners, and also ad campaigns. And these were typical when you considered your in-person events. And now you can even still, as a virtual event, do virtual column wraps and virtual escalator clings. And you'll see that in a later slide. The second key element is educational opportunities. These are virtual industry sessions, product images and videos, and even downloadable resources. These are an attempt to replicate your industry showcases or your product theaters that you would have typically in a live event. The third element, which we're seeing start to come in more and more now, is a virtual exhibit hall. And you can see that also pictured here. You can see that they have little avatars, and you can actually physically manipulate a character virtually to walk up to a booth. Lastly, you're going to see that there are going to be networking opportunities. So these include, as pictured here, a live chat room or virtual meeting room, so you can still achieve that one-on-one interaction with your target audience. And these are kind of like with a live show, it would be your in-booth conference room or the ancillary meeting rooms that you would have kind of on the edges of the exhibit hall.
Okay, okay.
One of the things I think is clear, as you and I and Lauren were just looking at earlier, is that it's open for interpretation, though, isn't it? You know, a virtual trade show like the smaller conference that you're going to step through, you know, has a vastly different way that they're handling what is your, you know, your quote unquote exhibit space, right? There are some that are over the top, it's all 3D, as if you have just been, you know, augmented reality walking onto someone's floor space. But, you know, some are handling it much more basically than that, as I know you're going to show us with this hop-in example.
Right. And I think another thing to talk about when we talk, especially about a larger conference that's got a more sophisticated opportunities for interaction in a virtual trade show world, like some of the pictures in this slide, you know, this one over here, for example, which could be an education area or interaction area with various parties, is I think you explained to me that, for example, the ECR, which is the big radiology meeting in Europe, that one technical advantage of the virtual exhibit was that if somebody entered an exhibit for one of the companies that had an exhibit and went up to a station of a product or service they were interested in, and in doing that they identify themselves. So maybe it's John Kingala from Nigeria, then they can immediately bring the Nigerian rep to that station from where he or she lives in Nigeria, and they can actually have the local person talk to this visitor at the virtual booth, where in a normal in-person meeting, you might not be able to afford to have people from every country in the world come to your booth and participate.
Right. Isn't that normal? Right.
Right.
Typically for most of our clients and in our own experience working at, you know, different companies, we have a binder. We have a binder and we have a scanner. And more often than not, we're taking leads, you know, attaching business cards to sheets and filling out forms and things for follow-up afterwards for, you know, half the people who aren't there presently. So that absolutely can be an advantage. But there's a flip side to that. You know, that means that all those people have to be somewhere at their computer on alert, right? And so as Jeannie Wirt from Siemens says, I love this, chasing the sun. You know, we're chasing the sun, and whoever's whatever time zone around the world, you've got a real challenge in trying to make sure that that works for their schedule. So if we have, you know, RSNA, the US equivalent of ECR in December, November, December, and it's central time zone, I mean, that doesn't quite work well for the representative in Nigeria to be on alert. But yeah, I mean, it can work as long as everybody's committed to that kind of coverage.
It's true. Yeah, you're right. If you had a huge time difference, it might be 2 a.m. for someplace else in the world. Okay, so let's move on. And so this slide's great because it sort of gives you a feeling for what a larger one might look like, and we'll circle back to various sizes of these shows. But let's look at a small conference example. And this is a platform called Hop-In, which sort of goes with the platform name. You can hop into a conference. And I saw it used in a small conference. This was a conference where we had about 120 genetic specialists attend this conference virtually, which is pretty good attendance. And it was originally supposed to be held in Boston in July. They put it off into August so they could do it virtually. So this is one I personally experienced, and my colleague and I, the cost was $8,500 to be a middle-level sponsor of the meeting. And it just turned out, because this is all sort of last-minute organization for them, it was good because we ended up being one of 3 sponsors. So we really showed up. We stood out.
Nice.
Which is an advantage that other companies might benefit from. You should ask how many other people have paid in to sponsor a small virtual meeting.
Yeah.
Because it could be good. So if we would have done an in-person exhibit at the same meeting, it would have still cost us around $8,000 for the booth space, for my colleague to fly in from France, for me to drive up with equipment to Boston, which is where it was going to be held, lodging, food, and so on and so forth. It would have cost us probably around $8,000 to participate. Sure. What did we get virtually? We got a 10-minute presentation to all attendees, and they were all there. And you would not get that in a regular in-person exhibit.
That was a question I had of you when looking at this, is that are many of these elements, like your logo, I would imagine, you get logo recognition, but which ones of these are unique to the virtual, where they're obviously working very hard to earn your business as a sponsor? Okay, so let's say one downside is the virtual exhibit. You were able to link 2 downloads to it. So if you had an in-person exhibit, you could have 10 or 15 pieces of literature or scientific studies you'd be handing out. You might have a video playing in the background or whatever it might be. But here on the virtual exhibit, you had 2 downloads and then links to the company's website. You'll see all this in a minute. So that would be sort of a downer, so to speak. And of course, the company logo, if you were a sponsor of a meeting, you would have that somewhere in their program and so on and so forth. But what really was interesting was the 10-minute presentation. There was a demo area where they had an introductory video of the company. And since, again, there were only 2 companies, ours included, that put videos up, people had only 2 things to look at. Then we had a guaranteed introduction by the organizers to 5 attendees. And that was from a list of attendees that we took out of the main list. We gave them about 10 or 15 attendees that we prioritized, and they indeed sent us introductory emails to these attendees that we could follow up on. And finally, the speed networking, and I'll explain this a little bit more in a minute, but they had a really well-organized speed networking where during the so-called coffee break, people actually networked, and you could talk to one person for 5 minutes, then another person for 5 minutes, and so on and so forth, and exchange business cards. Coming out of this, we actually did really well in this meeting. So let me just go through these really quickly to get. Yeah, and I was just going to say, at first glance, your good deal question, $8,500 for 120 people virtually, I wouldn't have said normally that was a great deal. But when you look at how hard they were working for your business and how much they valued what your objectives were as well, to me, to all of us, right, going to a medical convention, it's all about access. We want to access the, HCPs. And if we can't do that, it's pointless to be there if we're not having engagement directly with the physicians or the nurses or the techs or whomever, the administrators. And so your last 2 bullets on this slide more than make up for that $8,500 price tag. Sounds like a heck of a deal.
Yeah. And I think another thing we have to consider is the nature of what we're selling. And so our equipment for this particular audience is going to be anywhere from $41,000 to $60,000. So if we just sell 2 or 3 pieces in the next 6 to 8 months, we've more than covered the cost of this. And I do believe we'll do that. And I think the payoff further in the future is even higher. Mm-hmm. So I think that's another consideration. If we were selling tongue depressors, it would be a bad place to be. Right?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. So this is a slide of the reception area that you can see where the big arrow is over here. And so this is the reception. If you look at the navigation column on the left, this is the reception area. If you look down to the bottom right, you'll see another big arrow pointing down. That's our exhibit. If they click on that, they go to our so-called exhibit. Then you'll see another arrow here. And if you scrolled this window up, you would see the schedule come up below of the presentations. And this is the reception. This is what somebody sees when they first enter the conference on this hop-in platform. Then if we click onto the exhibit area. This is the upper half of what somebody sees in the exhibit. There's a description of the company logo. There's a couple links where they can request further information. They can go to the company website, our company LinkedIn page, and then they can also download some resources. And this is where I thought it was a little bit cheap, is that we only had 2 things that we could download. But that's our so-called booth. It doesn't look like the virtual booths that we just saw in your previous slide, which almost looked like a real booth. This is more of like a landing page. And if we go to the bottom half of this rolled up, or if we sort of scroll down, then we see the team members, people that were here participating in the conference. So that's what you go. If you link to our so-called booth or landing page, would be a better way to describe it for listeners. Now, if we come back to the reception area, then you'll see this arrow that says demo area. And if you go to that part of the navigation, then you come to these 2 video links, and one of them's ours, and it's a short video introduction, about 3 or 4 minutes long, to MetroVision as a company, and then there's another company here as well. And so that's pretty effective, and I like that particular feature. And jump in if you have a comment. I'm just going to try not to kill a lot of time on this. Then the other part of this platform is, if you look in the upper right on this, we're back in the reception area again, and you can see the chat column, you can see a polls, and you can see a people, and you can see in a little account area up there. And if we blow that up in this next slide, you can see that in this example, and this is my colleague Jacques Charlier from MetroVision, I could send him an invitation to a video call. And we would meet right here in the main area, and a video opens up, and we can actually meet and talk, just like speed networking. Or at the bottom of his profile, there's a place where I could send him a message. And so that's sort of a neat way communication means that they have built in. And then finally, if we go back to the reception window and we go to the left-hand navigation column, there's a stage button that says stage, and there's a little red thing that says live. And that means if I click on that stage thing, I would go, or that stage button, excuse me, stage thing. I would go into the actual stage and see the presentation, which you'll see right here. And so I clicked on that button, and here is a presentation by the chairman of the meeting, Dr. Scaria. And I can actually blow this window up so it takes up my whole screen, so the details that you see here would be much more clear.
Okay.
So that's sort of how this navigates around. And then if I go back to this reception screen, when it's time for the coffee break, the networking break where you can do the speed networking, you refresh the screen, and suddenly in between the stage button and the demo area button, you'll see a networking button appear. Okay. And it only appears when there's networking. And you could call that speed dating. You know, we call that in the United States. For international listeners, I'm not sure what you'd call it, but speed networking. And when you click there, you say you're ready to go. You click a certain command button, and before you know it, here's a picture of me talking to the leader of the conference in our speed dating session, our speed networking session. And what you might be able to see, it might be under my controls here, but there's a thing that says connect and extend.
Yes, we see it.
Yeah, you can actually extend the conversation if you're really deep into something. And I had to do that a couple times because of what we were talking about with people. And then if you click connect, you exchange business cards, and now you have their email link.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know,
go ahead. Yeah,
I was just going to say, what's the normal attendance if this were to be an in-person program? Is it usually around that same 120, 150 mark?
Yes, it would have been nearly the same. And that's a great question, Lisa, because I have been told, let's see, one of the ophthalmology meetings, it might have been the ASCRS. They actually had greater attendance virtually than they would have had in person.
Sure. I I don't doubt that, because people have had a chance to, stay wherever they are and fit it in, even if it's just for 30 minutes, right? Where you wouldn't have traveled if you only had a half a day and it was a long travel, distance for it.
Right.
The other thing I love about your example here, and I think it's going to be unique to this kind of volume of attendance, is that the ability to really integrate industry with the clinicians is really heightened. We don't see that when we go to some of the mega conferences. There's exhibitors, you're contained over here, right? And then the rest of the conference is going on around you, but you're over here. Whereas, you guys work real hard to be blended with this particular course. And I think that is one of the advantages of these smaller attended conferences where people are more integrated. And that's a definite plus.
As a small company, and MetroVision is a small company, the last in-person trade show we attended, but even though it was the last in-person show, COVID was looming over us. So it was a socially distanced, I should say it wasn't even socially distanced. There was hand sanitizer everywhere. Hugs were not permitted because all these people knew each other really well, and you were shaking hands by touching elbows. So that's the stage we're at in early March with COVID in the United States, right? But again, a small meeting for a small company, it gave us an outsized presence. We got some really good interaction there and some good leads. So small, medium-sized companies, and we'll get to do you exhibit or not question.
Yeah,
might want to be thinking about where they go in this era.
Well,
let's move into large conferences as an example, and you had this great example from the ECR. So I'm going to move into the next slide, and I'll let you talk us through this. And I can use the cursor if you just tell me where to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking at when pivoting to virtual events is that, there have been so many different trade shows throughout the industry, and none of them have quite looked the same. Obviously, the 120 person trade show is going to look very different from the 15,000 person trade show that we see here with ECR 2020. This was, from what we could see from the outside and also some feedback from some exhibitors as well, this was a well put together show. The site was very user friendly, and there were also a lot of educational and exhibiting opportunities. Not only do we see names splashed up on the main page, we also have virtual clings, and we have a very easily navigatable exhibit hall. The only downside is for those small to mid-sized companies, because there are so many expo halls and centers in an event this big that they could very easily get lost in the layers of different floors.
Yeah, this one really, we were impressed by it because you do have the association working really hard to emulate what would have been the in-person vibe if you walked into the conference center in Vienna to attend this program. So you walk in and it's this general area where you see the different options available to you, just as if you would walk into McCormick Place in Chicago and, you got the coat check and you got the information counter and up this way to the exhibit hall and over to the elevators. So, it had you sort of orient yourself. And again, to our point just a second ago, it's such a massive trade show opportunity, though, that the exhibit hall was definitely kind of contained in its own little realm. And so you had to want to go to the trade show. Again, if you've gone to any big, huge conferences, usually the exhibit hall, it dominates. And there's so much, it's almost like it's up front and center and in your face. And so you can't get beyond it to your meeting room unless you go through the exhibits. And in this case, it's definitely the exhibit hall's contained. So you have to want to go to the exhibit hall and you have to know where to go within it. Because like Lauren was saying, some of the small exhibitors, there's like almost you have to take the virtual escalator down 7 layers to get to the cheap booths that are 10 by 10 for the newcomers. That's level 7. So you got to want to go there because you got to go through all these different layers to get there. So there's a lot of clicks involved. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I think this is one where it kind of blows up the emphasis on the trade show. main page. I think that's the next slide.
One thing I'm going to say is for international listeners or all listeners, I've been to the Vienna Congress Center, and so I can see this. And one thing I like about this is that the way they laid it out in an image is that it actually makes me feel a bit comfortable. So as a potential exhibitor, my first reaction is sort of friendly because it's a nice exhibit area, it's a nice exhibit hall, and so my initial reaction is actually somewhat positive as opposed to looking at a cold website or something. So that's interesting. Okay.
But you're right. That is a good point. Contrast that to the one you were just showing us where you didn't really feel as if you were, physically walking into this environment. They did a good job on a reasonable budget and for a small attendance. And obviously you said it's normally in July and they made it virtual in August. So a quick turn. And that was impressive too for that smaller meeting. But this one, I think it's normally in April or May, and they postponed it and then pushed it off a little bit again and finally happened in mid-July. And so we were just commenting about how, isn't it interesting that, like you might see physically a big banner draped as you walk up into the hall, again, the column wraps, the escalator clings, and those sorts of things are being accomplished in a virtual setting. So you do have those advertising opportunities if you're a huge sponsor. And also as a huge sponsor, you've got this, kind of pick of the litter up the top where, you say, I want to go to the exhibit hall, fine. Well, if you're not one of these, 20 key accounts or, key sponsors that you want to visit, you have to really know where your company is you're going to go looking for and how to get to them and how many clicks. Yes, there's search features, so that's nice. It can take you more quickly there, but obviously the more money you put into it as a sponsor, the better visibility and the better traffic you're going to get. The hot spots all over this little rendering down at the bottom. There's all these little places where you click on them and then you just jump right to the sponsor.
Right. And it's like what we were saying, it's not like a live show where you grab your glass of white wine and your canapé and you're just kind of walking around the exhibit hall and walking up to booths who you might have never heard that company name before, but here you are and you have the opportunity to just happen upon them. That's, nobody's going to happen upon your booth. Maybe they'll have a glass of wine, who knows, but they're not going to happen upon your booth in a virtual setting like this.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Because I wonder how much traffic is just generated. I mean, as marketers, we strive for that, right? We figure you got 3 to 5 seconds to capture someone's attention as they're walking by. You want to be located by the big, huge sponsors so that you get that overflow traffic. I mean, all those kinds of elements in your planning and your strategy, they go away.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but that's a really frustrating thing is that I remember reading a study on a couple of the large medical exhibits or congresses, and they said that doctors indicated they only spent like an average of 1.5 to 2 hours on the exhibit floor over a 3 or 4 day congress. So I think the walk by, the potential of walk by leads and or I should say lead capture is fairly poor unless you have a really good location, which small companies don't get, small and medium. Right. So you have to have other ways to do it, which you're
exactly.
Very familiar with. But for listeners, this image that I'm looking at has all the big sponsors and their buttons, and it's really easy for somebody to click on one of those buttons and go right into an exhibit. So should I click on the next slide?
Yes, please.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so what you see here, and a question that we've had and we discussed earlier was, are there companies that work with these medical societies to conduct the virtual events that are better than others? So in other words, when a virtual meeting is going to be hosted by XYZ company, would you say, oh, I know that's going to be great. They do a good job.
Yeah.
And my answer to this after doing some research is that I have not seen one company be used, across the board for these events. It is very much an RFP and case-by-case basis. I know, for example, RSNA has been in planning for months just trying to pick a vendor. And obviously they'll take their past experience and past society shows into consideration. but it really is just based on a very individual basis. So what I've done is I've looked at the event manager blog, and I've looked at the top 10 virtual event companies of 2020. Inkspo was rated #1, and, just said, these ones have all been rated based on their features, their pricing, and their support. So maybe if you see that one of your shows is going to be powered by one of these companies, you can rest easy knowing that they've made it in the top 10. But also what we found is that some some associations such as ECR, they use their own virtual platform in-house. They did not go to a third party like Inkspo or GTR.
And so, I think the answer to that question, again, which we were trying to think through, what might questions be that we would get asked, and that was one of them. So I think this is such a hot space right now where everybody knows that, virtual events is an area of growth, significant growth, crazy growth, that, we're going to see a lot of other diversity among the groups of companies that do offer those services, like your Hop-In isn't even listed here, but obviously they do a good job, and that's what they do as well. So, I imagine, as we see with most industry areas, that, there'll probably be a flurry of all these little disparate companies, and then there'll be some consolidation. But right now, again, based on industry rankings, this is a resource to go to. And I think in the resource section of this particular program, we'll put a link to that, as well as it's on the slide here.
Right. And so Lauren, was this the ranking that they came up with?
Yes.
At least so far. I mean, obviously it's really early in this world of virtual platforms and virtual shows, but in terms of the platforms, this is what they came up with at the moment.
That's correct. This is where we're at so far. I mean, there's a lot of lists, and a lot of these names, they appear on multiple lists. Some lists have them in alphabetical order, but for example, I've seen Inkspo, Six Connect, Hexafair on a number of top 10, top 14 virtual event platforms.
Okay.
And they're not paid spots. So it's based on society's experience working with these platforms.
Right.
And Lisa was saying also earlier that a lot of it, when you look at the quality of a virtual event and the platform that they use, is dependent on the turnaround time that they give the virtual event vendor. So if they only postpone their virtual event for a month, and they don't have the budget, they don't have the bandwidth to really pull together and create a seamless virtual platform, that's going to reflect poorly on the virtual vendor and the the virtual industry partners. They're not going to have a great experience.
Yeah. So if the association is not spending the money and or doesn't give them the time, a really good platform might look poor. Okay.
Right. So it's sort of, go cautiously into it, because you might think that it was the platform, but it might have been society's doing, or a combination of it just not working out effectively. But that same platform company, like these listed here, could be excellent in another society relationship.
Okay. All right. So I'll move on. So here we have the next slide is optimizing your virtual trade show.
Yes. So actually, if you want to go ahead and advance to the following slide, we talk about best practices for virtual exhibitors.
Here we go.
Great. So we have a variety here. I'll just touch briefly on these. So the first one, which I think is obvious whether you're doing a live event or a virtual event, that's to develop your show strategy and define success before you begin anything. Don't purchase any exhibiting, and don't look at your sponsorship opportunities until you understand what exactly you're looking for and what what success will be and what ROI is going to be for this event. The next one. Oh,
absolutely. I think that's so important, and so many people in the past, they've just been used to showing up. Yeah, that's great.
That should be pervasive no matter what your circumstance, in person or virtual, but it merits mentioning again on virtual.
Exactly.
So something that we were talking about earlier as well is that even though this event isn't live, the event manager, the marketing manager, sales manager should create a booth schedule so that we have our A team assembled. And if somebody walks up to the booth from whatever country they're from and they click the chat button, they're not just sitting there waiting for a response, because they will leave your booth and then you could lose a potential lead.
Yeah, that's something I think we're having to really come to terms with at ECR when we were doing some of our just sort of, I don't know, sleuthing. There were some companies, some of the big ones that had they promoted something to the effect of, we have 120 of our top staff ready to answer your question. Pick your category of question, pick your region, etc. And 120 people and was envisioning are all at their computer around the world, ready to respond if that pops into them right away, which again is a heavy drain on your resource and your staffing. But again, in a virtual environment, hopefully it's manageable from a cost perspective, but you just got to be ready and plan for that.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. Next is to be sure to test your technology ahead of time and under different circumstances. The last thing that you want right before your booth goes live is a technology malfunction that you're not prepared for. That could overshadow your entire message for your booth or your virtual exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have people who are logging in from all over the world on different kinds of browsers, on different kinds of devices. You need to make sure that ahead of time you've prepared for all of these different pathways and what could possibly go wrong with your technology. Next.
And I think you need to have the people that are manning the booth, so to speak, virtually, they need to understand how to work virtually.
Right. Well, it's funny, in doing the physical trade shows, I mean, for decades, I went to originally and then started to teach how to work a trade show, because it's not the same as me being a rep in the field going and calling on my accounts. I don't know who they are that's going to be walking up to me. I don't know their status, their decision authority, their interest. I don't know if they're a competitor, loyal account or whatever. So there's so much you don't know. It translates here too. I mean, maybe you get a little bit more insight because the application itself makes known to you who these people are. They're identified more readily than, them hiding their badge or their badge turned backwards or whatever on the show floor, right? I mean, we know all the tricks.
Right.
So sometimes it's really hard, and this is a little improved for that, but it's still something you have to be mindful of. Yeah, how to work the virtual trade show as a staffer.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Lauren. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I love the back and forth in conversation. So the next one is, again, kind of a no-brainer, whether it's virtual or it's a live event, but rather than counting on the association to promote your virtual booth and your presence, make sure that you're using a multi-channel marketing strategy for various styles of respondents and consistency across all activities. People now can't physically walk up to your booth, so you need to make sure that you give them excellent directions to get there over multiple platforms, whether it be social media and e-blast, column wraps virtually.
Yep. A lot of different things that you get a chance to do should all be considered for making sure that, again, especially if you're one of the smaller industry sponsors and or exhibitors, that you are leveraging those to make, yourself be heard through the noise of everybody else.
There's lots of noise.
Lots of noise. Yeah.
Next is to make sure that your booth is compelling and interactive. So give serious consideration to replicating hands-on with your technology and offering some sort of gamification application website. This will support your physical booth as a kiosk down the road. And it will also support your situation today with the sales rep and a one-on-one demo virtually as well. And make sure that the story of your booth and the activities in there are compelling for people to walk up and want to visit.
On this point, I got a question that I'd be curious what your response is. In a couple of the industries that I'm familiar with, you have a lot of small and medium-sized companies that are marketing anywhere from 10 to 100 products, SKUs.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they'll go to a trade show and they might have, let's say, 10 instruments out in their display, even a small 20-foot inline display. They'll cram 10 instruments, 10 diagnostic instruments, or a bunch of surgical instruments. In a situation like this, where you're trying to make it compelling and interactive, and you're somewhat consigned by or restrained by virtuality. In other words, somebody can't walk up to your booth and see everything. They're going to walk up to your booth and maybe have some buttons to push. should a company in that situation roll the dice and decide what are the priority products that they really want to focus on? Or, maybe they already know because it's 80% of their sales are, 20% of the products. Should they just do that and really go after those particular products, since they can't necessarily throw everything on a couple tables?
Well, I think it's tough when you have a full portfolio of offerings, and especially if you're a solutions-based company and you're wanting to bring the full bag to the table. So maybe it's something where you will highlight a very sought after imaging system, and then the accessories with that, you have different pathways virtually to get to those and to dig into those separately on a microsite and find different ways to get there. Maybe it's not as direct, but I do think that you obviously need to think about still continuing to sell that full bag and that full solution, even if your space is minimized virtually.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to say, oftentimes a lot of our clients, to your point, if you're a small startup, you might have really one system. And so it might not apply to them, but, as they grow, as they become larger, the mid-sized companies, certainly the largest companies, you do have, hundreds, maybe thousands of SKUs. And so we always try to say, even though the product managers wouldn't like this because, they're vying for their own spot, in the sun or their own place in the spotlight, whatever. Anyway, the challenge is that you can't do all things well on that front. So the best thing you can do is to figure out what's hot and realize that that's going to pull through interest and leverage that hot product for the discussion to be started, and then work that particular discussion further. But you don't have to show all your 100 or 1,000 SKUs, as long as you're effective at how to feature one and then use that to leverage and pull through to others. The other thing I was going to say is that your example of the kind of the jewel case that we talk about, I would argue that if you can just see past the here and the now, that there's a longevity for the investment in a real good application that you develop. So it could be that in my booth, there is a station, and the station, when I walk up to it virtually, I move forward, so it gets closer, almost like virtual reality. I walk up to a counter, I get to click on the counter, I get to, have a hand that looks like it's grabbing a product. And while I can't physically have that tactile experience, I get that, but I at least can invest in the pan, zoom, rotate, and kind of thing that I might do in person. Absent the feel, I at least can look at a close-up of a feature and a function and, then put it down and look at the next one in the jewel case. So again, an investment there has far-reaching implications beyond just the here and now, if you don't believe that the virtual trade shows is going to be here to stay, which again, arguably may not necessarily be accurate.
Correct. No, that's a good point, because then you can link that to your website. Now you've got a more enhanced website.
Sales reps can have it, on their laptops when they're in the field, whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next best practice is to host a live webinar to engage visitors. This is very similar to the in-booth theater presentations, and this is to complement, or in this case, replace certain posters and podium talks. This will just drive people to your booth at a specific time during the day and make sure that they have something to show up for. Next is a no-brainer, again, live or virtual. I think it's a little bit easier on a virtual scale, but to qualify and identify leads and follow up on them swiftly. Some associations are giving leads live. As people walk up to your booth, you get all of their information, or you get a report at the end of the day. So you're able to very quickly and very easily follow up with those leads and make sure that they're not lost.
Yeah, and I think one of those things that's so unique about this environment is that unlike at a physical trade show where I take a lead on Monday afternoon and we're all still there till Wednesday morning, I might have that same physician that I'm speaking with he's at his desk right now. He's watching this, and we're all in our, in our normal lives. And so what I might want to do is actually capitalize on the fact that he doesn't have to travel home. I don't have to travel home. I don't have to unpack and do all that. I can immediately engage him. I can follow right back up on that, because he might be sitting there more receptive to it if I can act quickly, like within the next 12 to 24 hours on that opportunity. So swiftly has a whole new meaning in the virtual in terms of a lead follow-up timeframe.
Okay.
And then the last tip that we also got from Jeannie, we're at Siemens, was to be sure to schedule one-on-one meetings instead of relying on live chat interactions with your customers. I think that she found that those pre-scheduled meetings yielded a much higher response rate than the live chat button that folks could push when they came to the virtual booth.
Yeah. And so that's a perfect lead in, because I just wanted to do a shameless plug for part 2 of the series that we've been talking about for next week, when we will have the president of the HCEA, the Healthcare Convention and Exhibitors Association, Jeannie Wirt, who's also leads global events at Siemens. She'll be around to talk about her own personal experiences, but also from the association side, not just industry, but association. And then this whole page 2, we think will have a different perspective if we talk or ask the question next week about best practices from a company that does create virtual exhibits. So we're having Mike Ellery, who's the Chief Creative Officer at Sparks, join us as well to talk about his take on what are best practices and things he's seeing in the healthcare industry. But the beauty of inviting Mike in particular is that he also sits across all kinds of different industries and high tech, and there's some best practices there outside of healthcare to maybe model after. So that should be a real interesting one to catch.
Absolutely, and I wish I'd have said that at the outset, but because this is going to be probably a 3 videocast podcast series, and this is just the first one. So there's lots to do here, but this is a great start.
Mm-hmm. Right. And one other thing, I'm going to do one more shameless plug. If you look at all of these, Lisa and I recorded a webinar earlier this year called The Art of Hosting Virtual Meetings. I can't even do my own plug right. And really, it kind of delves into these best practices and has a more granular look at creating pre-show checklists, what you need to keep in mind during the show, and then post-show follow-up. So it kind of just is it's a whole webinar dedicated to these best practices.
Okay, excellent. Very good. So is it time for the next slide?
Next slide, yep.
Whoops. Why isn't it going? Oh, that's why. Were we in the pitfalls, or did I go too far?
Yes.
No, that's next.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, very good. So now we're on a slide that's called Pitfalls to Avoid.
Yes, so we have 3 here that are kind of the big baddies that you need to look out for. The first one is to avoid complex platforms. These can bog down your customer's browser and make for suboptimal virtual booth experience. Again, if somebody is surfing the web, they're looking at your booth and they can't access anything, that things are glitching, they're not going to want to waste their time to figure out how your booth works. They're just going to go away, and we don't know if they'll come back.
Okay.
And that then kind of is a nice swan dive into our next point, which is to refrain from including long videos or high-res PDFs that take a long time to load in a virtual exhibit hall.
Yeah, I think that's just a real quick experience there is that during ECRs, we were thumbing through different exhibitors and trying to see how they varied in their approach, from the big ones to the small ones. You could tell when someone wasn't mindful of the environment so well, and they did put really long videos, high-res videos that weren't unnecessarily needed for the streaming approach, right? For its being available via the web. It's fine if you're going to watch it on the big screen in person, but not necessarily necessary to have that big of a file size. And so it would just choke, spin and spin and spin. And so the information you wanted to get, you couldn't get because you didn't have time. And of course, in the virtual world, we are subject to everybody's variabilities, their own computer, their own internet service provider, just all kinds of things that play into it being questionable as to, whether or not it'll play as you intended.
Very good point. get something to them that gives them enough information to capture their interest and be able to capture their information so that you can get back to them for a one-on-one later.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And lastly, just because you can does not mean you should. So when you're looking at different virtual concepts, think about the complexity, the man hours, and the cost to do something. And you really need to measure these factors against the projected outcome to understand your ROI and determine if it's even worth it. I think a lot of people really want to make a huge splash virtually because they feel like they're missing that live component. And I feel like it could be somebody's enemy because they're trying to pull too many things into play, or they're trying to go too big when they don't otherwise have those resources.
Yeah, it's interesting, in this new realm, a person who might have been a 10 by 10 booth could literally become a 30 by 40 booth in terms of its scope and size in a virtual realm. You're not charged extra to make your 10 by 10 become a 20 by 30 or so, except for the fact that you're limited to your engagement sections, right? Your hotspots, your videos, like you saw with that hop in, the number of downloads that you can have, you're measured by the bandwidth you use. And so you have to be mindful of that. So just because you could perhaps make this ginormous booth, think about the expense of that and then how it's going to cost you more in implementation.
Right. Well, I like that. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. We can apply that to lots of things.
Words to live by. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So next.
Yes.
Typical costs. And so what do you have 1/3 of your original live trade show budget, or what's that mean?
So really every single event, they set their own pricing, which makes it hard to pinpoint a specific number for typical costs. Patterns that we are seeing though are these larger shows will have tiered sponsorship pricing. And those typically start from about $3,000 to $5,000 and can max out anywhere from 75 to, roughly 100,000, or as you see here, almost $200,000.
Yeah, US would be even more, right?
Yeah.
So the rule of thumb that we've used so far for our clients, and if we want to keep roughly the same footprint or size in the virtual program, and it seems to work, is take 1/3 of your original budget that you had for a live program that includes, honorarium, travel, labor, setup and tear down, drayage, and that will cover, 1/3 of that will cover the cost of a virtual trade show. And while this rule of thumb typically works, we have seen some virtual conferences like you see here with ESCRS and ASCO as well that have a significant price jump if you want to have any kind of virtual presence that's substantial at their program. So price jumps like this where we're looking at, $4,000 up to $35,000, or I saw another one that was $5,000 up to like $75,000.
Wow.
These have the potential to really take out any small companies from the running to have any visibility at these programs.
Yeah, and something I would like to say in terms of budgeting is frequently in small to medium-sized companies, the actual total cost of attending an exhibit is not really clear to upper management or the executives, because when they look at a spreadsheet that's presented to them on the trade show budget, all they see is the booth space and possibly the shipping and so on. They don't account for, because they're putting the travel, the per diems, the hotel, and all that. They're putting that into a different budget category frequently.
Right, exactly.
So I think they really need to consider that, consider the entire budget, because so instead of being shocked by some of the virtual trade show prices that they might see, they really need to consider the entire budget as one thing when they're making it's apples to apple comparison.
Right.
And then secondarily, if they're a small to medium sized company, they have to decide, are we going to get buried in this virtual world, which is we sort of pointed that out earlier in the conversation. Because if you're just going to get buried and people can't even find you or see you, then that's difficult. So now, and the example that we have up here on the screen for people that are listening is the is a trade show that I love to go to. It's one of the best ophthalmic shows in the world. It's called the ESCRS, and they had to go virtual. And it's typically got lots of small and medium-sized companies exhibiting. And what Lauren was just alluding to is the first level of exhibiting is called the bronze for 4,400 euro, which is about, these days with the dollar weakening, I don't know, it might be $5,200 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But all you get is, you have to choose from 2 booth templates, and essentially it looks like a small picture of a booth. You get to, in that booth, you can have 2 PDFs. That's it, 2 PDFs that somebody can download if they come into that little bronze small booth. You can have one-to-one chat is available, V-cards, and then of course you have your profile on the platform and on the website, but that's for, over $5,000. Mm-hmm. The next level is silver for 34,650 euros. That's almost $38,000. So there's this huge gap in between. And I already know that my colleague in France, we're not going to attend this meeting virtually because of this huge gap and this crazy cost. And even at that silver level, you get 5 uploadable PDFs and you get 3 uploadable videos. So to put that in perspective, if you had an in-face meeting and you had a 20-foot inline booth, you could have all the literature you wanted to hand out. Mm-hmm. You could have a video in the background. You could have all these things that you cannot have here. So we already made this decision that this is a bad deal. And I think this organization, they are using, by the way, I think the 3rd or 4th ranked platform that you had listed in the platform,
okay.
6 Connects. But it's not really 6 Connects' decision as to how they're going to price things. That's that, and I don't know who would.
Well, it isn't though, Ted. I mean, because their costs passed on to the society have to be recovered by our registrations and our, sponsorship dollars. So the more expensive the platform does drive that to some degree.
Oh, it could be. Well, I tell you, I really predict that they'll regret this program.
Yeah.
So
well, especially, what's the typical attendance in person on this one?
This is a meeting where you'd have 10,000 or maybe up to 15,000 between industry and between delegates. So probably 10 to 12,000 medical delegates, and then the rest is industry.
Yeah. So, with a pretty big exhibit hall, typically, no doubt, for that level of attendance. So I imagine that, these smaller companies, they're going to be pushed out. I mean, because you'll be buried among the other big sponsors who are ponying up these dollars. And
right.
that's unfortunate, when it's only the big companies can present.
Right. And something else I'm noticing looking at this is that you have to pay at least $230,000. I can't even, over $200,000 to embed a link to use your own 3D booth. So that $200,000 doesn't even cover the cost of what it would cost you to have your own separate 3D booth build out.
Yeah.
So that makes it, I can't even think really of a large company that I think that would look at this and think this is a great use of our funds. Cause coming from a large medical device company, if I would have seen these in my old position, I would have gawked at these numbers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. To feel like you're going to be gouged for $200,000 just to play, and then your own, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 exhibit house building your 3D rendering with all the hotspots and everything. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see how this all works out in the end. Okay, so should we move on?
Yeah, we're nearing the end here. I know we're taking a lot of time, but I think it's good content.
Right. This is good.
Okay.
Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Hold on.
Couple more. I think we're back on track. I know it's hard when
is it worth it? So now we're talking about, and we're segueing into this, Is it worth it? When we're talking about the pros and cons. So on the pro side, we have 4 categories: cost savings possible, lead generation, time savings, and broader audience. So let's walk through those.
Right. So when we do look at our cost savings based off of our initial rule of thumb, we'll be saving, if you want to keep the same footprint that you would at the live program, for most cases, roughly 2/3 of your original budget that would be spent on lodging, airfare, meals, print production, shipping, and other things that come into play with those live programs.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
Lead generation, as we were saying earlier, I feel like it is easier to follow up with online leads because the online registration forces people to add all of their information, and all of the leads are automated. You don't have to, wrangle folks in the booth and make sure that they're following up and taking scanning badges appropriately.
That's a good point.
Yep.
The challenge.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Time savings, this is, this can be taken both ways actually, but we put it in the pros column because virtual attendance can be completed from home. So you're not having to take that time to travel to a conference, check into your hotel. That takes a whole day out of your schedule, and you can set your schedule with your colleagues at home. So determine booth coverage. While it might be time consuming when we look at booth coverage, on the front end and on the back end, it's far less time consuming than a live program.
Right.
And then finally, it's that broader audience, is that virtual shows attract international attendees that were previously beyond some companies' reach.
No, I agree with that. And even some national attendees where, let's say in a group practice, they may have in the past in face-to-face meetings agreed that, only 1 or 2 of the group get to go to the meeting and achieve the whole group's objectives, in terms of education and looking for maybe products or investments they need to make. But more people now could attend from that group.
Right, exactly. I know this is hard because we're having to read the slides for you carving out just the audio portion of this, but our tendency is to just gloss over and talk about it, but we're wanting to be methodical about covering the content you can see potentially.
Yeah, well, it's okay if there's another podcast, what is it? There's this one guy, every one of his podcasts is 3 hours long. Now, don't get scared, listeners. We're not going 3 hours. We're almost done, but and it's one of the most popular podcasts in the world. So those are the pros, and then we get to the cons. And if we look at those, I'll just list them real quickly: networking interaction, engagement, technology dependent, and last minute pivot. Yeah, that's a big one. So let's just walk through those. Let's walk through the cons of a virtual exhibit.
Okay. So again, networking interaction, you lack the opportunities to engage with attendees organically. I know a huge component of going to these live shows is to continue to build those relationships with our existing customers and cultivate relationships with new customers. And it's hard to do that when you can't take them out to dinner or, go to the bar and, have a conversation. So that's lost.
Yeah, even just meeting them for a cup of coffee, that's you're right, that is lost. And when you run into people in the hallway or in the aisle and you have that chat, those things really add up and they have a lot of value, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So next is engagement. The online attendees are more easily distracted with multitasking, pressing work needs, emails, and other interruptions just from everyday life because we're at our homes and, we do have distractions at home.
That's a great point because at this meeting that I just attended yesterday and today, during the networking today, I was matched up with this a lady, this executive of a biotech company, and she and I were chatting, and I was asking her what she thought. I asked a lot of the people what they thought of this virtual trade show experience, this small, I shouldn't say trade show, small symposium experience, and everybody's impressed. But she did say that, well, I really didn't attend much yesterday because I was on the phone with other meetings. I was doing this, I was doing that. If she'd had to go to an in-person meeting, she might have spent more time actually in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So here she had the ability to be distracted. So Okay, go ahead. Engagement. So now we're on to the next one.
Yes, so online trade shows are 100% dependent on technology, and they're vulnerable to connectivity issues or software complications. You know, the technology gods are not always in our favor, and I know I have experienced that more than once. So it kind of adds a whole nother level of complication and honestly, things to worry about as an event manager or marketing or sales manager.
And it would be a
those are
shame.
monkey-wrenching things.
It would be a shame to have invested $8,000 to $10,000 in something, and then have your technology not working. That would
Awful.
that'd be terrible. You're right. Okay, excellent point.
All right, and then something that Lisa actually pointed out to me this morning was that last minute pivot. Is that depending on how together the association is, you might not have a lot of time to promote your virtual attendance. You know, if they're switching from live to virtual in 3 weeks, they're not going to have those long email blast campaigns or other options where you can really tell your audience and the attendees where you're going to be, and you could get swallowed up in the virtual event world.
I think a lot of people, a lot of the societies, you know, are still holding on as long as they can before they make a decision. And so, you know, try as they might, I mean, it's not necessarily their fault, but just that they've got a board, then they might have, you know, diverse opinions about this and where things are heading. And we're all in medical. So maybe they're like risk takers and thinking, oh no, it's all going to be better by November. But so then they push it another month. And then before you know it, when they make that decision to go virtual, we're out of time. We're out of time to really do it justice. And so, you know, that's just the nature of what the environment is right now.
I agree with you. And the example we used of the ESCRS, which is the meeting where we were talking about the crazy costs, here it is, the beginning of August, actually, 6 days into August, they just got this information out about August 1st, and they were asking for commitments by August the 3rd to get some special points and stuff. That meeting is in mid-September, early to mid-September. So
that's really tight.
Yeah, not only pivot from the standpoint of being able to create pre-show engagement that might help drive people to your virtual booth, but also the ability to put together your own plan to get if you need to have a vendor contracted to create your own virtual booth. Let's say it's a meeting where you're allowed to bring your own virtual booth or a connection to it. You know, all that stuff takes time to work up, and yeah, a last minute pivot could be tough.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So really where we had landed with this is it goes back to our best practices, and that's before you move forward with a virtual event, determine your event objectives. If your objectives are to network and to cultivate relationships with your customers, a virtual platform is not the right place to do that. If your objective is to get measurable leads that you can follow up on, then perhaps a virtual event is the right platform for that.
Or you could even think about, well, if what you need are actionable leads, what other ways are there to do it besides a virtual event? Because let's say that, go back to that ESCRS example where that the next level up, which still gave you very little in the way of privileges, was around almost $40,000. $40,000 you could do easily 10 or 12, especially if you bought in bulk. You could do a whole bunch of e-blasts.
E-blasts, webinars, application development. There's a lot you could do with those dollars. Yeah. Absolutely. And for that single event that might or might not be well attended and the people engaged and people find you and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
For example, if your reps are good, if you have a sales force or distributor force, and they really know their doctors and or their healthcare professional customers, could be nurses, whatever it might be, if they really know these people, you could put together a really nice invitation-only type of webinar, and the reps could be out there pushing the attendance. You might even be able to work with a CME company and get, I know it has to be arm's length, but there's a way to do it where you could give people some type of continuing medical education in an arm's length way, but that would still give your company some kind of credit and create a lot of value that would attract people. So I do think it requires really careful consideration.
Yeah, and it dovetails into what I will cover just here, and I'm going to look at my notes because we've thought about and have experienced a number of different types of alternative programs. So I want to make sure I don't miss one of these ideas as I share it. But to your point,
should I move ahead then?
Yeah, I think that I'm not sure if we have a slide necessarily on that.
Well, we do.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, we do. Yeah. So, the thing that I think is a key, like you just said, is.
Let me just interrupt you briefly. What we're talking about now is, and we've sort of been segueing into it in the last conversation on the last slide, but this slide for listeners is alternatives to virtual events. So let's keep going.
Right. So this presumes you have said, I'm not going to pay that exorbitant fee, or my medical conference isn't even offering a virtual attendance. It's either not happening at all. It's just completely canceled. A lot of neuro ones are that way. For example, this fall, no alternatives at all. So now it's on you as the company. What am I going to do to replicate that kind of, those objectives that I had heading into the fall and turning the corner into next year with leads and all. So, one of the things you just mentioned is, you can do your own webinars, your own programs. So maybe you don't have a place for your virtual booth within a medical society virtual conference. That doesn't mean you can't create your own virtual booth anyway. That is something you promote on social media and email through your reps, whatever nurture campaigns you've got, whatever vehicles you've got to communicate it, build the thing that would have been your live booth and invite people to it outside of any other conference, and let them engage with your product. I mean, it becomes kind of a cool web application and segment of your website that you could drive people to. So there's that. The other thing is to think about your own virtual meetings with specific groups that you want to target. Think about that being more of a dinner conference or a symposium where you invite specific people and they attend. There's even a cool feature where you can it's called Eat and Engage. So Eat, Engage, I think that's right, where you can get a group of people together, a business meeting for dinner, and you arrange for this Eat Engage service to deliver a nice steak dinner to every one of your attendees. So they're eating a wonderful meal while you're holding a Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever the platform is kind of session. So you're replicating that vibe of being together. And again, it was over the dinner hour. So that's kind of neat.
That's a great idea.
It really is. I mean, all these people are coming out of the woodworks thinking of these very clever things to make it seem as real as it was when we could meet face to face and in person. I'm a big fan of webinars. We've seen webinars just go through the roof. But the thing is that you're competing with a lot of people who are doing the same darn thing. There's a lot of webinar content out there. So how do you stand apart from that? To your point, CME might be one draw. That's pretty expensive, and usually it does take some time, and there's a lot of restrictions on you. So, maybe CME is possible for you down the road with a partner. Maybe as a big organization, you can have this own, HCP accredited division as long as it's, doing all the right things. But presuming you can't, what else might you do that makes it unique to make sure that it's a hot topic? One of the things we like to suggest is that you maybe think about partnering with one or two other, let's just call them strategics, right? That they're synergistic content, they're synergistic products, they're not competitive. It would all be used by the same type of physician, and you all band together. So it becomes this sort of community event that has a much better chance of a big draw. So that could be good, especially if you can identify perhaps even an industry influencer, a thought leader, a KOL, who could help to be like the program director. That could be really solid in a virtual setting. Yes, you're now 1/3 of the program, but chances are you're going to get a much greater attendance, and that has a lot of appeal. And then the other thing that we do talk about, like in our white paper, which is this little thumbnail you're seeing on this screen, this reinventing medical marketing, other ways that you can engage people. You think about, why did I go to a trade show in the first place? I wanted to introduce a new product. I wanted to get some hands-on with my product. I wanted to show expanded indications, my new clinical data. I wanted to take leads and further the sales process along. So one of the tools that we've been hearing about being really prominent now is Proximy. And Proximy is a way for very little investment on your part. It's just really an application, and it just relies on having certain sort of technology on your side as well as the physician side in his office or her practice or whatever. And you can do a sort of a physical virtual hands-on with your product and interaction. So those are some really good ideas on ways that if you've chosen not to do the trade show route, that you could achieve some of those objectives that you had for what would have been at the show floor.
Absolutely. Those are great ideas. And I'm sure that it's just going to, even more ideas are going to come up. So that's terrific. And where do we go from here? Are we budgets?
Yeah, if I might suggest, maybe this just becomes a resource that we put at the bottom of the podcast. I have a long narrative, as a marketing leader for not only our business, but a bunch of other client businesses. We have a real strong opinion about how should you, heading into the season, because for most of us, many of us, we're planning already in September our budgets for 2021, and we're starting that process for finance teams and putting it all on paper. Then you go through the reviews and the cuts and the whatevers, and the board has to approve it, all that fun stuff that we look forward to in the third and fourth quarter. But there's a lot of things, a lot of nuances to what you need to think about for 2021. So if you don't mind, I'll just put that on a document and we can post that in the resource center.
That'd be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Show notes in a resource center, and that'd be terrific. And it could be even the subject of a totally different.
I agree. As we were thinking about that question and documenting what would be some of the points we want to make, I was thinking, man, that could be its own at least 15-minute podcast in and of itself. That's a good point.
Sure. And then, medical conferences, the future model. Let's go over that for a minute. At least this is something people need to be thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Right. So as we look ahead into 2021, we need to have an understanding that a reversion to the norms of 2019 and before might not exist. And so the new or the next normal, we're looking at potentially hybrid meetings. So some people attend in person and some attend remotely. And then the other one is, which we actually heard from a webinar earlier this year, is a hub and spoke meeting. And so really what that looks like is that people attend their local drivable metro area and sit socially distanced in a hotel still together, and they teleconference with other cities throughout the world. So it would be kind of like a bunch of small regional trade shows all coming together, from their different locations to create a mega or a national or an international show.
Yeah, we attended a webinar, actually that plus a few conversations with some thought leaders, some physicians that we know in different specialties. So this doesn't seem to be pigeonholed into just one anecdotal piece of information, but we're hearing it widespread. And in talking with some of our exhibit partners that we've worked with too, they're saying we're hearing that as well. So it's echoed across. So especially with the physician audience, well, let's just say clinician audience. So it's nurses as well. They actually have said and are saying it's irresponsible of me to think about getting on a plane and traveling to a conference. I owe it to my local hospital, practice, health system to be healthy and remain local and not have to, when I go away, risk being exposed to something, bring it back, be quarantined, be sick and infect others. They're just saying it's irresponsible. So instead, they're all about, though, driving 100 miles, maybe 150, to attend a program in a metro area within their state or within their region that allows them to, again, be isolated in their car, wear a mask when they get to the hotel, check into the hotel, keep a safe distance, control their environment more than physically getting on a plane and traveling a distance, and then just, daisy chain connecting these different hotel conference rooms together for one big united conference. And so I think that this is really going to be one of the prominent ways that we see these things working in the future.
Yeah, and it's that's interesting. I agree with you, and at the same time, it's concerning, especially for smaller and medium-sized companies that don't have the resources or the people in place to be at a number of different locations.
It's true. It's true. That's one of the things that, again, on my budget slide, I was going to talk about, making sure that you put more, instead of, one big event you might attend and the big trade show that you want to update every year, think about really decentralizing that and making more 10 by 10 types of booths that could be regionally deployed. Now, that means you still need to have staff. Now, again, if I'm the single marketing or salesperson, maybe I don't mind myself going to those different locations, setting up my booth and being present there. So it's not like I have to have staff in all these metro areas where we're having a meeting, but there's that consideration that you're going to have some sort of presence there locally in order to be represented.
Yeah. Very good point. I guess a lot of roll-up banners will be sold.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Although there's some really great displays that are not very expensive that look a lot better than a roll-up banner. So that's a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have anything beyond this?
I think that's the end of it. Yeah.
That's it. So I'll stop sharing the screen. And by the way, if the viewers, the people that have seen the video cast, if you like what you have seen in terms of this PowerPoint display, the graphics and stuff, this is Bichsel Medical Marketing Group material. This is just the way they work. And not to embarrass Lisa at all, but this is just professionalism. I'm just scrolling through some of these slides. This is the kind of result you get when you work with Bichsel Medical Marketing Group. So just a little point there, and I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it. Shameless plug. Whoop, whoop. Notice.
Well, anyway, this has been really terrific. Yeah, it's been a bit long. But it was jam-packed with really great information, and you guys put a lot of work into this, and I appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to next week when we're going to be preparing. We'll be talking to, I guess, is she the president of the health?
Jeannie. Yeah, Jeannie Wirt. She is the head. She's the president of HCEA, which, is an organization that all the listeners should be aware of. And in fact, I believe strongly in this, that, your events leaders should be members of HCEA. There's great information from their peers, best practices. There's even what I always found in 20 years or more of being a member of HCEA, an online event directory. So you want to know the details about any upcoming program, you can log in and you can see what's that event, when is it going to be held, how many people attend, what's the profile of them. There's a lot of rich information just at this directory as a membership that's free, or as a member that's free.
And not only is Jeannie the president of the organization, but at Siemens, she heads up the part of the company that does all their exhibits.
She is the global events leader, right? Yeah.
Right. So talk about somebody that's got the chops.
She's got a little going on, and she can bring all kinds of perspective. But in her role as president of HCA, she also is beholden to the other side, not just the industry side, but the other side, which is the association. So HCA membership includes a vast number of medical conference societies and associations. So yeah.
Right, and then the gentleman we'll have with us next week is Mike Ellery?
Mike Ellery, right. And he's the Chief Creative Officer for Sparks. And Sparks is a 100-year-old company that does events and experiential experiential events and exhibits. So he said that, he'd be delighted to share, as he's working within healthcare for clients, but outside of healthcare as well. They've got quite an incredible who's who among their client base. So they're always pushing the envelope a little bit in terms of how much and what they do to engage in the interactive. And now in the virtual world, they're applying some of those same learning. So it'll be interesting, I think, for the audience to hear him say, again, within healthcare and outside of healthcare, what is he seeing as far as best practices for virtual events?
Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll wrap this up. Ladies, again, thank you very much for the effort, and I'm really looking for the next two down the pike, because I think the third one, which we're trying to organize, we'd like to get some doctors in a room with us to talk about this and talk about their experiences and their advice and get their feedback on where virtual events are going to go, trade shows, the future, and so on. So
yeah, agree. Okay. I think that's what we planned. And I do believe that, I know from our perspective, every time you have a forum, and HCA put on one of these themselves for members, which was, grabbing a group of physicians that were multi-specialty and asking them questions from industry, just so we can get the latest kind of, checkup. What are they thinking? What are they doing? What are they seeing? What's their perspective? So it's invaluable for us as marketers, in shaping what we're doing going forward.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, again, thanks a lot. And we'll be in touch. We'll probably be meeting again tomorrow, at least a couple of us. So,
yep.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
Take
Ted.
care. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.